Welcome to the Filmed Live Musicals podcast, a podcast about stage musicals that have been legally filmed and publicly distributed. The Filmed Live Musicals website contains information on nearly 200 musicals that have been captured live. Check it out at filmedlivemusicals.com. And now, on with the show. Welcome, bienvenue, to the first episode of Filmed Live Musicals, the podcast. My name is Luisa Lyons. I run Filmed Live Musicals, and with me is Al Monaco, a director extraordinaire and Lincoln Center aficionado.
Hello, yay, hi.
Welcome, Al. Thank you for joining me on this adventure.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be great.
I'm very excited.
Me too.
So Filmed Live Musicals started in 2011 when I was studying for my Masters of Musical Theatre at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. I feel it is important to say it in that way. And I was at the cinema with a group of friends from school, and we were watching Company filmed live from Lincoln Center, starring Neil Patrick Harris and Patti LuPone. And before the film started, there was a little pre-show interview segment with Ellen M. Crass, the producer. And she produced Sunday in the Park with George and Into the Woods. And in this pre-show interview, she talked about how difficult it was to get funding for filming live musicals because no one had ever heard of it. And I immediately sat up and said, wait, haven't people heard of Into the Woods or Sunday in the Park with George, which things I had grown up watching, and I was surprised that it was so difficult. So I ended up writing my thesis on filmed live musicals and couldn't really get away from it when I finished school, and so I built a website, filmedlivemusicals.com, which is a database of stage musicals that have been legally captured and distributed to the public. So it doesn't include bootlegs. It's all films that have been legally captured. So that is the database.
Love it. It's such a wonderful resource. Such a wonderful resource, especially for people who don't have easy access to live theater. Yeah.
And that's my hope, is that it will legitimize filmed live musicals. And I think the pandemic has certainly changed all of that. Because filmed live musicals have become and film live theater in general, there's such a demand for it during the pandemic. And of course, with Hamilton being released just yesterday or 2 days ago, as we record this, it's a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So what, in your research at the New York Public Library, what have you seen many musicals at the New York Public Library?
No, I have actually seen mostly plays, but I did watch Millie. I do remember watching Millie.
The Sutton Foster version?
Yeah, because I was up for a position to work on that show, so I wanted to refresh. Yeah.
Do you remember what the quality was like?
Oh, it's fantastic. I think that I don't ever feel like the film directing ever gets in the way of the actual stage production, if that makes sense. Yeah. So everything is always very like you're right in the room with them, which I always appreciate.
Yeah. Do you remember how many cameras or what kind of angles they used?
It's a good question. Wide shot, and then so it was very much like Hamilton, some very up close, some very, whole picture, mostly whole picture, though I think with musicals, you kind of have to, you know what I mean? But some up close, but for the most part, you got to see the entire stage.
So my understanding so for people that don't know what we're talking about, the New York Public Library has the Theater on Film and Tape Archive, which was started in 1969 or 1970 by Betty Corwin. And she had this vision to capture stage musicals and archive them. And now the Tuft, or Theater and Film and Tape Archive at the New York Public Library in Lincoln Center, in New York City, has something like over 4,000 archival recordings of stage shows. And the collection now includes not just shows from New York City. It extends further than that. But at the beginning, it was just a camera at the back of the theater. And over time, it has become more sophisticated. And with digital cameras, it's become easier to have multiple camera setups.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, my idea for today for our first episode was to talk about filmed live musical firsts. So the very first musical, and so I want to put parameters, because when we're talking about musicals on screen, there's thousands at this point, movie musicals and TV musicals. What we're talking about in filmed live musicals is stage musicals that have been filmed in front of a live audience and distributed publicly. So again, it doesn't include bootlegs, and it doesn't really include the recordings from the Theatre and Film and Tape Archive, because although it's a public library, that archive is only accessible to people with a library card physically at the library. So I wouldn't call that widely distributed.
And you have to have a reason. They don't just let anybody see you have to have, there's also even further restrictions. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's really only available to researchers. So the average person can't come and watch a chorus line from the original production. Such a shame. There's been talk of the Theatre and Film and Tape Archive releasing some productions for schools. That's happened as a result of the pandemic. But again, it will be very restricted, and there'll be lots of, I'm sure, strict rules to stop pirating. And it's so exciting, the idea that archive could be opened up even for school kids.
Absolutely.
So the very, very, very first musical to be filmed live and publicly broadcast was Magyar Melody all the way back in 1939. Wow.
Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
And Gone with the Wind.
A coincidence? What I would love to do more research into is how many people actually watched it, because I can't imagine many people had television sets in 1939.
Yeah, that, and more people. I think going to the theater was probably more like a social event than it is now. So it probably was more popular to physically go and watch theater.
Absolutely. Well, people just didn't have TV sets. This is pre-World War II and pre the industrialization and the mass release of televisions. So they had started to exist, but only the very wealthy and very, very few people had them. But it would be interesting to look at the numbers. But only excerpts were filmed of Magyar Melody. It was just song and dance numbers, basically. It was just short bits. And then a little while later in May on May 1st, 1939, Me and My Girl, a compilation of Cole Porter songs.
Oh, wow.
Was performed. It made the Lambeth Walk, that it was a dance craze in the 30s. It made that very popular. And it was filmed at the Palace in London. So that was the first.
Wow.
And then jumping ahead to the 40s, so the war kind of got in the way.
That little pesky thing.
As it does.
Right.
Hugely disruptive. But in 1944, a new television station, Dumont, which no longer exists, but it was one of the early independent television stations, they aired the first television musical. And so from what I can gather, it wasn't filmed in front of a live audience, but I just think it's an interesting precedent that from very early on, television stations were interested in filming theater.
Absolutely.
So that first musical by Dumont was the Boys from Boise. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Boise, Idaho.
From all accounts, it was quite extravagant, and the musical itself was pretty average. The music was by Sam Medoff, but audiences the reviewers rather said that it, the musical wasn't much to write home about, but the production values were surprisingly high, given that it was the first time that anything like this had been tried. But it didn't take off. It wasn't a game changer or anything in the industry. It took a while before full scale musicals were produced on television. So throughout the 50s, we have variety hours, like shows like Musical Comedy Time, the Bell Telephone Hour, Kraft Television Theater, Ford Theater Hour, and they were usually hour-long review spectacle kind of shows, and they would feature numbers from Broadway shows or like standalone numbers and sketches and skits and things like that. Have you ever watched shows from that period?
No, not television. No, I'm more of a movie buff. But that's so it's all very interesting because I, up until very recently, did not think that theater or any type of theater should really be on a film. So this is all very interesting to me.
And now you're on a podcast about it.
That's right.
Yes. I did not know this fact about you.
Oh, yes. I have a very specific story, which we could talk about later.
Oh, no, please.
Yes.
I want to hear it now.
Oh, my God. This was right before Broadway HD was ever created, thought of. And I was home for Christmas. And my uncle said, what if theater was streamed? Like, what if, like Netflix, you streamed theater? And I told him, never in a million years would anybody ever allow people to I said, you're not even allowed to have your cell phone in a theater, let alone a full-on professional camera crew in a theater. I said, that's not how theater's supposed to be. And then wouldn't you know, and then here I am like eating my words, because wouldn't you know that Broadway HD does exactly that.
So I love that you come from that place, because that has been the mindset that theater on film is not theater.
Right.
And it's something I think about a lot and talk about a lot on the website and on Twitter, that, what is a film of filmed live theater?
Right.
It's not theater, because theater, you have to be in the room with an audience. Right.
And it's different every night. It's this very sacred, I use sacred, in a very liberal term, but it's a very sacred, like, special experience.
Mm-hmm. It's only in the room.
Mm-hmm. It's
in the room where it happens, to use
exactly
a contemporary reference. And then a film is something. It's a piece of art that exists on screen,
right?
Whether it's been on video or tape or whatever, the technical terms behind the technical history of how you capture film, but it's something that exists on a screen. So what is it that is created when you film a live theatrical event and put it on screen?
Right.
Is it?
I mean, it's a great question.
Yeah. Some people talk about that it's a hybrid form, but I don't think we have a name for it yet. And I think that's something I would love to come up with the term. Film live theater for now, theater on screen, film on screen, the stage on screen, but it doesn't convey what it is.
I know, I agree. It doesn't completely, I know. I always just love pro shot. Pro shot is like my go-to term.
But then you have shows, so a lot of shows in the database are, musicals in a black box theater that, it's one or two, maybe three cameras dotted around the theater. And it's not necessarily a professional shoot. Like, it doesn't have the close-ups or cranes coming in, or dolly shots where the camera is panning across the stage and the camera physically moves across the stage. So can that be called a pro shot?
I would think if it's like an understanding that this is going to be recorded legally, then yes, I would say it's a pro shot. If it's something that's done on your phone or like in your shirt pocket, then that's where we cross
That's a
the line.
bootleg. Yes.
I know.
And then the other part about legally filming comes into payment for everybody.
Right. Oh,
And
yes,
paying
absolutely.
cast and creatives and all the design. Like, yeah, there's a whole team of people that creates that show that should get paid. So that's a whole other episode, how the agreements work
Absolutely.
and
Hmm.
why. So part of it, the resistance in the US certainly has been the cost of filming a musical. So, for example, Hamilton cost $10 million to shoot.
Right.
And on top of the, I forget the cost it was to mount that show on Broadway. It's an additional cost because you have to pay everybody
Right.
for the shoot, and then residuals and how many times can you play it afterwards. So I think that has certainly been a big barrier to filming, and with the belief that theater shouldn't be filmed in the first place.
Right. And to think, like, as you're saying that, I'm like, well, Hamilton probably can get away with it because they have so, I don't know, they bring in so much revenue, but there are shows that like were limited runs, that are rare, that had special performances, right, that were very near and dear, that absolutely did not bring in the money the way that Hamilton did or does. And so what do we do about those that deserve to be seen?
Yeah.
Oh,
How do
yeah,
we
I mean,
it's very complicated.
absolutely.
And I think part of what the resistance to filming theater comes from these early captures in the 50s that were and I think because they were filmed without an audience, perhaps some of them had a live studio audience, but from my understanding, most of them were filmed just in a TV studio without an audience present.
Mm.
And I think
Hmm.
it changes the performance. It's why I'm so careful to only include musicals that were filmed with an audience, because I think captures are able to capture some of that magic that happens between a performer on stage and an audience watching. That cameras are able, to some extent, it will never replace the real thing, and that's not what filmed live theater is for. It's not to replace, but to document and archive and make accessible
Hmm.
something that is ephemeral.
Absolutely. And I think, like, I remember, I think there are pros and cons to that, to even that, which I can't believe I'm saying that too. But for example, in Masterclass, Zoe Caldwell or Maria Callas, she needs the audience because she pretends like they're all of her students in her class. So for that, absolutely. But then, and I saw that pro shot and it was beautiful. But then I also saw the pro shot of Choir Boy, and in an intimate setting, one of the most special plays I've ever read and I've ever seen. And for people to, three times, three different cell phones to go off during these just heartbreaking moments, and for that to be the only pro shot of that show, I think is unfair to the actors, is unfair to the playwright, is unfair to the director. And so I grew up, I grew up watching the Leslie Ann Warren Cinderella over and over and over and over again. And so I mean, I just remember just loving that show. I love Cinderella, but I love that film of Cinderella, and that certainly was without an audience, and it was so cheesy, but it's something, I don't know, it's like it is like its own genre almost. It's something so special you can't contain it. Um, and so, yeah, I think there are negatives and there are positives to the audience as well. And again, I can't believe I'm saying that, but in this medium that we're talking about that we have not defined yet, I think the question of audience is still up in the air for me, whether it's beneficial or not.
Oh wow. See, I have yet to come across a film live musical where cell phones or audience interruptions kind of marred the capture.
Wow.
So I think maybe it was masked by music or they edited out. That's yeah. How do we mitigate that?
Yeah.
Because for me, the filmed live TV specials that came
Hmm.
out since Peter Pan, of the new edition, not the Mary
Yeah.
Martin and
Right.
Kathy Rigby versions.
Put the Taylor Loudermilk in the, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, what's her name from Girls played Peter Pan?
Allison something.
Yes. But anyway, for me, those productions, I couldn't watch them
Yeah.
because they weren't theater. They were advertised as theater, but they're TV shows in a studio. Whereas for me, Jesus Christ Superstar Live was the first TV live musical that worked because it had an audience present. Although the screaming crowd made me crazy. I was like, please tell them to stop screaming and please stop cutting to commercial break.
Yeah. I agree with you about Jesus Christ Superstar, and I am not a very big Andrew Lloyd Webber fan, but that show particularly works in that setting. Like there's another, I can't. Oh yeah, so Andrew Lloyd Webber he did the show Must Go On.
Yeah.
And so he released another production of Jesus Christ Superstar.
The O2 Arena.
Oh, and I'm like, this is the only show that can do this. This is the only show that can just make, so I agree with you. I think that is, but like Little Mermaid didn't work. Rent didn't work.
Little Mermaid was such a shame because they had an audience, but they decided for whatever reason to do all the book scenes from the cartoon and live musical numbers, and it was misjudged.
Yes.
And Rent was such a missed opportunity because I haven't looked at it in a while. I forget who played Roger, but hurt his ankle.
It wasn't Jordan Fisher. He played Mark. I don't remember.
But he injured himself in the dress rehearsal, which they recorded, and then he had to be in a cast and a wheelchair. And instead of allowing him to go on in that way, which I understand health concern or safety concerns, they aired the dress rehearsal. And there was a live audience, but they knew it was a dress rehearsal, so they were holding back, and it wasn't the real thing. It didn't have the excitement of the actual performance. And I think that was like a real missed opportunity to allow theater to happen when, not having an understudy. But could he have done it in his cast, and would that have changed that performance? And it was only happening at that one time. And it was a shame we didn't get to see what it could have been. Yeah,
I agree.
Also, stop putting commercials in my theater.
Yeah, oh my goodness gracious.
So infuriating.
Hashtag stop putting commercials in my theater.
Hashtag please, hashtag now.
Right.
Like, how joyful was it to watch Hamilton without ad breaks? Can you imagine putting ad breaks in there if that had aired on like NBC or ABC or something?
No, there were a couple times where my Disney Plus, it had to buffer, and I was getting upset just at the buffering, because I'm like, guys, what is going on? Ryan Reynolds he's about to what? No. Oh, so
were you watching it on Friday when it came out?
Yeah.
Yeah. We watched on Friday night, and it was better. We watched after the watch party started.
Gotcha.
Because we were lining up to watch it with my sisters in Sydney.
Oh, right.
Hashtag the Lyons sisters.
I love it.
So, going back to TV musicals, brings us back to Peter Pan. In 1955, the Mary Martin production of Peter Pan was performed on television. So that version was the Broadway production and the Broadway cast, but it was redone and condensed for television. So it was a shorter version. And it was a huge hit. And so they redid it in 1956. That time it was done live, but I think without a studio audience. It was just broadcast live on television. And then they did it again in 1960, which is the version that is currently available. And it's the first, from what I can tell, I think it's the first Broadway show on television, even though it was a studio version.
Wow.
And then that was followed by Cinderella with Julie Andrews, and the version that you...
Leslie Ann,
yes.
But I do have that like disc set of the Julie Andrews of this, like I have the recording of this performance because I love it so much. It's beautiful.
I need to. I confess I've not watched it. I haven't seen it.
I'm just a sucker for anything Cinderella, so I'll just watch anything with Cinderella in the title.
Did you see when it became a Broadway show?
Yes. Oh, yes. I have my thoughts on that as well. Discuss those thoughts. Oh my God.
Not filmed live. And then jumping ahead, so there wasn't really anything else. There's no live musicals on TV. The variety hours fell out of favor and were replaced by sitcoms and made-for-TV content rather than bringing theater in to fill the airwaves, basically. In 1973, we have Pippin being the first Broadway show to use actual footage from the show in a commercial on television.
Wow.
And there's a great line from the commercial. You can see the other 119 minutes of Pippin live at the Imperial Theatre without commercial interruption.
Wow.
A lot of sources say that it was the first used footage from the show. From what I have read, Fosse recreated the number for the screen, and he also directed how the camera angles would be.
Of course he did.
Yes, that's right. Of course he did. It's the commercial is available on YouTube.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's really it's fascinating to see it with Ben Vereen front and center.
Oh.
But Pippin wasn't filmed live itself as a show until much later, till 1981, and it was filmed in Canada, not the Broadway production. So the filmed production was filmed in Canada.
Wow. And
then we get to 1976, which is, I think it's quite an important year for filmed live musicals. Pacific Overtures, Sondheim, was filmed in its entirety, the original Broadway cast, for distribution on Japanese television. And I think it's interesting that it was not released in the American market. And I would love to do more research about why Japanese television, why there was a market for American musicals, and how that all came about.
Absolutely. Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, it was produced by Hal Prince, who also directed the production, in conjunction with a Japanese producer, Mikan Erickson Hukahodo. And I apologize, I'm definitely mispronouncing that. But it was the first of 3 productions to be filmed for Japanese television. There was Will Rogers Follies in 91, which was filmed at the Palace, and Victor Victoria with Queen Julie Andrews was filmed at the Marriott Marquis in 95. So there's definitely, there was a market for, or a tiny market, because those musicals are quite far apart. But I'm curious to know more about, there's more research to be done there.
Absolutely.
And then we go into the 80s and we have the rise of pay TV, and producers realized that there was a niche market for, or they sensed that there was a niche market for musicals on television. And so Sophisticated Ladies, which was a review of Duke Ellington music, was the first musical to air live on television while still being performed on Broadway. And back to these contract negotiations, most of the original Broadway cast refused to appear in the broadcast because they were scared about what that broadcast would do to ticket sales. And like you said, they didn't believe that filming theater was a good thing. So I'm curious if any of those original actors regret that decision now.
That's very interesting. That to me like signifies just a true passion and love for your craft, which I respect very much. Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, the sources that I've read about Sophisticated Ladies, the newspaper reports say that contract negotiations were sour, and so I'm curious if it was maybe part of their reluctance to film the show, but also they wanted to be paid more.
Yeah,
which probably.
Yeah. Right.
given how new and rare this was. And their demands were probably not met. And so they brought in people from the tour, I believe, were the folks that were filmed. But that is now available on DVD. It was released by Culture in 2005, and it is also on YouTube. Don't condone it, but it's there. Because who's getting residuals from that YouTube video? Nobody.
Yep.
And then in 1986, we have Live from Lincoln Center, which the TV program, it had been airing before that, but it was mostly opera. It had started 10 years earlier in 1976, but it had only broadcast opera and ballet and classical music to that point. And the first musical that they broadcast was Candide at the Met. And you can debate whether Candide is an operetta or a musical, but it was advertised as the first Bernstein musical to be aired on national live TV.
Okay, that's interesting. I always considered it an operetta. But we can call it a musical.
They called it a musical.
Yeah.
And Bernstein was still alive at this point, so. Have you seen Candide?
No, I've never seen it.
Me
I've only
neither.
ever listened to it.
Yeah, me too. I love the music. It's some of my favorite. Make Our Garden Grow is.
Yeah, he was.
I want that played at my
incredible.
funeral.
Oh,
not to get morbid, but it's such a beautiful song. And of course, Candide was filmed later, again, live from Lincoln Center with Patti LuPone, Kristen Chenoweth. I forget who else is in the cast because you only care about the musical theater people. Not true.
Yeah,
not
I was going to
say. But Kristen Chenoweth singing Glitter and Be Gay. Glorious.
Oh.
So into the 80s, Sunday in the Park with George was filmed, and it was produced by Michael Brandman and Ellen M. Krass. And I got to interview Michael Brandman when I wrote my thesis. And he talked about how Sondheim was very dedicated to ensuring his legacy and was really keen on using new technology to distribute his work. So it was a very conscious decision to film Sunday in the Park with and Into the George. Into the George, it's time to go.
Sunday in the Park with Wood.
Sunday in the Woods. Now I'm trying to think of a mashup. It's hot up here. Mother, can I guide you?
There we go.
Okay, so Into the Woods and Sunday in the Park with George and A Little Night Music were all filmed, pardon me, in the late 80s, early 90s. And there was a conscious decision to use cinematic filming techniques, which in my interview, Michael Brandman claimed that that hadn't been done before. But when I've watched the Pacific Overtures, I'd argue that they were attempting to do that. They just, the capture of Pacific Overtures is not super clear. And I think that's just because of the cameras that were available at that time and what could fit inside the theater and what could be done. I'm losing my voice. What could be done with an audience present. I think that's just gotten better and better as time has gone on. And most of those shows up until this point were filmed toward the end of their run and released either just before the show was closing or after it had closed.
That seems smart. So
they couldn't argue that it was really affecting ticket sales at that point because the shows were done mostly. Although the Sophisticated Ladies, when it was released, I'm thinking of a different one. Never mind. I'm coming to a different show. It's Memphis that I wanted to talk about the ticket sales.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So in 2006, the Met created Met Live in HD, and they were the first theater company opera company to release filmed live productions in cinemas. And it was hugely successful and hugely influential. And lots of companies have tried to replicate it with varying success, but the Met was incredibly successful when it first launched. And then in 2007, so it's relatively recently, it's within the last 13 years, we have Legally Blonde was the first musical to be broadcast on TV while it was playing on Broadway. Well, the second, really, because Sophisticated Ladies was first. But certainly the first of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And the producers have talked about how that capture and the airing on MTV helped boost ticket sales for the tour.
Oh, interesting. I always wondered why they did that. Why did they do that MTV show?
From what I understand, the ticket sales weren't great. It didn't get great reviews. It didn't get any Tony love, and it just wasn't selling very well. And so they decided to, the quote I love is, we're bringing an MTV musical to the MTV generation. It was aimed at our age group, at millennials and teenagers and tweens, who were a bit younger than us at that time, or a bit younger than me, certainly. I was not a tween in 2007.
I don't even know how old I was. Oh God, I was.
Well, you were a teenager, right?
I was a teenager.
Yeah, not a tween.
Definitely. No, what's a tween?
Before, like, not a child, not a teenager. So like 8 to 12.
Oh, okay. Got it.
You're a teenager, right? In 2007?
Yeah, 15?
Yeah,
15
there you
or
go.
16?
So yeah, it was aimed at your market, our market. I was a little older. I just finished college in 2007, but there was so much talk about, would it affect the tour? Would it affect Broadway? And it gave it a little bit of a bump on Broadway. But what really helped the tour was the Search for Elle Woods, the reality show to cast the new Elle.
Wow.
And because who was it that won? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Whoever won did the tour. And so people wanted to see who they'd seen on television.
I see.
The producers have directly said that the Search for Elle Woods helped boost ticket sales on the road.
Wow.
And I think that speaks to the power of making Broadway content available to people outside of New York.
Absolutely.
Because not everyone can afford the tickets to come to the city, let alone the Broadway ticket, the cost of coming to the city pre-pandemic.
I know. Right.
What's it going to be post-pandemic?
Absolutely. I mean, I just think about being a kid and using dial-up, which took forever, to load one YouTube video, which took forever, to watch a clip of a show from the Tonys or a bootleg, because that's literally the only access I had to the New York, or the professional theater scene, I should say, besides because I'm in Buffalo, we have a professional roadhouse, so we would get national tours, and I was involved in theater, but to see like those actual people on Broadway, never in my life did I ever think I would be able to do that. So I used what I had, which was dial up and hours to load a YouTube video. So I can understand and appreciate that.
Yeah, well, for me, growing up even further away in Sydney, Australia, Broadway may as well have been the moon. It was so far away.
Right, and, exactly.
We had access to VHS and DVDs. So I think the first film live musical that I got to see, or the first Broadway musical I got to see, was that 1989 recording of Into the Woods.
Yeah. And
it opened my eyes to this whole world that existed beyond my bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's why this is so important. So let's press on. In 2008, we have the creation of Digital Theatre in the UK. It's a company that was dedicated to streaming digital theatre content, and their first musical was a company called Perfect Pitch, and they do development of new musicals. and Digital Theatre received a grant. Oh, sorry, the company that filmed From Up Here, Perfect Pitch, that created that musical, they received a grant in 2012 from the Arts Council in the UK to look into digital content. And it started because of podcasts. They realized that there was this market online for creating theatre content, and they were curious to see if video captures would be part of that market. And so they streamed a new musical, From Up Here. It's still available on Digital Theatre. And I'm curious, I'd love to do more research into what the numbers were at that time, how many people watched it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in 2009, we have the formation of National Theatre Live, again, inspired by the Met in Live in HD. The National Theatre in the UK created a program where they would film plays and stream them in cinemas, cinema broadcasts. And their first musical was Fela, which was Broadway production, and then it transferred to the National Theatre in 2011. And it was the first National Theatre broadcast of a show that was concurrently playing on Broadway.
Wow.
First and only, I believe, right now. Still the only. So curious, be interesting to look into ticket sales, how that boosted or negatively affected. I suspect it boosted. And National Theatre have also filmed the Threepenny Opera, the Brecht musical, and Follies in 2017, which I'm so sad they didn't release during the National Theatre at home during the pandemic. I wish any of those musicals had been re-released to watch again, but the contracts were only for cinema broadcasts. So from what I understand, they can't do it again. In 2011, we have Memphis. It was the first musical to be released in cinemas while playing on Broadway in 2011, on April 28th, 2011 at the Schubert. And this is one I have done a little bit of research on the ticket sales. Prior to the release of the film, the capacity at the Schubert was at about 86%. And the week before the release, lots of promotions for the film, the ticket sales at the Schubert went up to almost full houses, to 98%. So it's quite a big jump. And then the ticket sales dropped back down after the release to 87%. So slightly higher than they had been, but not much. But it certainly didn't take away the audiences. People still kept coming. I think it closed shortly afterwards. And then in 2013, I just think it's interesting to share that Live from Lincoln Center, after having started as sharing mostly ballet and opera and classical music, most of their content from 2000 onwards has been musical theater content. And there's concerts featuring Broadway stars or composer tributes. They did a Sondheim tribute at one point, I think Stephen Schwartz tribute as well. And they've also done several full-length musicals and occasional plays, but it's mostly been musical theatre content. So I think that shows a shift in audience desires and what the Live from Lincoln Center are willing to produce and to sponsor.
Absolutely.
So 5 years ago, 2015, Daddy Longlegs became the first off-Broadway musical to be live streamed. It was produced by Ken Davenport and streamed from the Davenport Theatre off-Broadway house, which sadly no longer exists. Probably going to become a high-rise apartment.
Oh my God, that's depressing.
Have you seen Daddy Longlegs?
No, I've listened to the soundtrack and I've seen whatever like when you go on like Broadway World or whatever those YouTube channels are and whatever they release. So like clips and stuff, but never a full production.
It's such an amazing capture. And when it came out, I was so excited and I thought, this is it. This is going to be the game changer. It was watched by, I don't remember the numbers, potentially millions, but like from all around the world. Ken Davenport released an amazing statistics breakdown of what the numbers had been, and they were just incredible. And they boosted the sales at Daddy Longlegs, and it was able to it ran for another year or so after that live stream. So it certainly helped the sales. And Ken Davenport talked a lot about how the number of people that watched the live stream, how many times over that could have filled that little off-Broadway theater. And it was something
Yeah.
like the equivalent of it running for 7 years or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the reach of the live stream was just unparalleled.
Wow.
And then in 2016, we have the first Broadway musical to stream online, and it was Broadway HD. And again, Ellen M. Crass, she keeps coming back.
She's a smart lady.
Yes, and that was a Roundabout co-production and filmed. Oh gosh, what is that theater? It's a Roundabout theater.
At the American Airlines?
No, the other one.
Not 54?
Yes, 54.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Laura Benanti?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that was, it was streamed online, and it was meant to be a one night only thing, but it was so popular that Broadway HD made it available for 10 days afterwards. And you can now watch it on Broadway HD.
Wow.
So that's a quick little saunter into the firsts of filmed live musicals. So to finish off, my hope is that we'll be able to do this each episode. We'll do some quick questions. So I'm going to ask Al some quick questions. Here we go. Rapid fire.
No,
Al,
I'm too scared.
what is your favorite musical? You can do this. Favorite musical?
It's somewhere between Guys and Dolls and Next to Normal. Somewhere in there.
That is quite a range. That is also an excellent answer.
Thank you.
Do you have a favorite filmed live musical?
Oh, it's probably, I think I've seen Sunday in the Park with George. I think I've seen that pro shot more than I've seen any other one.
Also currently available on Broadway HD, just re-released.
Love
so you
it.
don't need to go hunting for your old VHS.
Nope.
What should we call filmed live musicals? Is it theater? Is it film? What is it?
Oh, it's a filming of theater. This is a great question. I would say, in all honesty, I would say that it's film. I would say that it's being presented as film, and it should be treated as such. That's what that's gonna be my answer for now.
So what's the difference between Cats, the movie musical that came out last year?
Oh Lord.
I'm not talking about quality, but just like the
we're just talking about the concept, the idea.
Yes. Of it. So you've got a movie musical, you've got the production that was filmed in a studio that was a recreation of the West End show. What's the difference between those two? Why is one a film? Is one theater? That Cats was filmed without an audience, but it's kind of the closest thing.
That I would say they're both film, but I think they're both to be treated as film. I think that they're just two different styles, like a documentary and a drama. You know what I mean? Like in a drama. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like documentary style.
Yeah.
When you follow like these live beings and you don't interrupt them, whereas with a film, with if we're going with the example of Cats from last year with Taylor Swift and all those people, that's interrupted, that's set up, that's scripted, that's actually adapted to be, that's written in a different way. Like they added things, they took things out, they gave
so here's a better what would you call Hamilton, the new one that just the film that just got dropped this week? Yeah. What is it? Is it a film?
It's a pro shot. Yeah, I would say it's a film. I would say it's meant to be treated as that, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's still the stage show.
It is a film of a stage show.
I love this question. It tortures me, and I'm taking a little bit of glee in watching your brain wrap around it. It's kind of the question to me. What is it?
Yeah,
I love it.
I mean, I'm gonna go with it's still edited. It's still I'm gonna go with film.
Pro shot film.
Yep.
I like it. Where do you stand on bootlegs?
Somewhere in the middle. Like completely honestly, I don't watch bootlegs as much as I used to, like when I was little, because I have clearer, easier access to theater and I can afford it and I can just see it whenever, pre-COVID. But I also understand why people do it. I understand why people watch them, I get it. So I don't condemn the people who watch them. I think I condemn the people who do it, like the people who actually do it in the first place.
Yeah. But to me, it's, they show that people want to see the live theater, and they're willing to watch it on screen.
Yes.
And there's money to be made and to be had in that industry, and that we need to find a way to make recordings
above
available.
The board. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because bootlegs often are terrible quality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like watching them for that reason. And I know people who love bootlegs and, are deep in that world and claim that the quality isn't as terrible as the general assumption is. But why watch a bootleg when you can watch a pro shot?
That's fair. The only thing I'll say is that there are some pro shots that just don't exist. Like
so many that such a tiny amount has been recorded.
It's so disappointing. Like the first show I ever wanted to see at the New York Public Library, they didn't have. So like I was like the only thing I wanted. It was Exit the King with Jeffrey Rush. He and Susan Sarandon.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Rush had done his own translation because Ionesco wrote in French. So Jeffrey Rush from French translated it, did his own. I really wanted to see it. And so for that, I then start to look for resources. Same thing with Merrily. Like there's original footage of Merrily, people walking out of the Neil Simon or the Alvin at the time, people walking out. And I'm so happy that there's a recording of something for that history, because that is history. I'm glad that there's something. Yeah. I wish it was professional, but who's going to record an 11 run? It only ran for like 11 days. So who's going to record that,
Yeah. It's and now how it comes to this question of what should we film, who's paying for it, why do we film it, should everything be filmed? It's very complicated.
I mean, I wish everything was filmed. I think so.
Our next question: what do you wish had been filmed?
Jeffrey Rush and Exit the King.
Not a musical. What musical do you wish had been filmed? I care about plays, but I don't care about plays. That's
a great question. What about, do you have an answer for this question? Do you know what you would have liked to have seen?
Everything. A chorus line, the original production. I don't know if that is at Tufts. Is it at Tufts? Do we know?
I don't know. I've never asked.
I wish everything had been filmed. I know that the theater is ephemeral. That's part of its magic for people, but there is a way to document and archive, and I wish we had access to more historical performances to understand how as a history student, as a theater student, to understand how conventions have changed over time, to understand how performance styles have changed over time, the orchestrations, like that. So much a capture can give us all of that information in a way that just a list of orchestra members or a list of, sometimes not all the orchestrations survive. So we don't have that information. And if you have a filmed recording, you have that information to a degree. You can hear it orally and see it visually. So I wish everything had been filmed.
I mean, I agree with that.
What would you like to see filmed in the future? What productions would you like to see filmed?
Ooh, I mean, it's really hard to think about the future right now, isn't it?
Yes, it is a tricky question in the middle of a global pandemic where Broadway is shut down for the next 7. What are we? July? 5 months for now. Yeah, it's potentially longer.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know if this exists, but a pro shot of Nathan Lane and Guys and Dolls, that probably, I go back and I watch all the rehearsal footage from that particular production. I would not have mind. I just would like to see, every iconic musical played by like a legendary actor, right? Recorded. So like they've done Gypsy how many times? I want to see every Gypsy with every Rose.
That is my dream, is to have a box set of shows like that.
Exactly.
Like, I want Gypsy, I want Hello Dolly,
Yes.
I want Shuffle Along, like I want all of it, and I want the box set. Like, can you imagine if you could have Shuffle Along, like the original 1920s
That would be a
production, and then the contemporary production with a making of about why they did the like the 2016, 17,
16, I think.
yeah,
Before Evan Hansen.
Can you imagine like what a document of history that would be to have the box set of all of those great performers.
It would be a dream.
Yeah. That's
like, I've seen several different productions of the same play at Lincoln Center because they have it. And I think that if they did that for musicals, I think that would be just a dream, just an absolute theater kid's dream.
Yeah. To have Hello Dolly with Carol Channing, Bette Midler, who was her
Donna Murphy, Betty
Buckley,
everybody.
And then Pearl Bailey from the all black production in the 70s. Like, I want every one of those women and every one of those casts. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like people talking about Hamilton, you know, they want to see Javier Munoz playing playing Hamilton. And all these dream casts that we could come up with and imagine, you know, but the cost and this, like, all of it.
Right.
So that brings us to the end, just about.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much for being here on my first Filmed Live Musicals episode podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much, Al.
Mwah.
Tell us where we can find you on social media.
Ooh, on social media? It's usually just Al Monaco, ALMONACO _. So Al _ Monaco. That's usually the gig.
Twitter, Facebook, Insta.
Yeah, Instagram, Al _ Monaco, Twitter, the same thing. And then, or you can also find me at Al Knits Things, because I knit a lot of things. So you can find me there too.
Fabulous. And you can find Filmed Live Musicals on Twitter at Musicals On Screen, or on Facebook at Filmed Live Musicals. And we also have a Patreon. Tiers start at $1. For $1, you're just supporting the site. For $5, you get early access to the Filmed Live Musicals newsletter, which comes out each month. And for $10 patrons, you get access to the newsletter and also early access to this podcast. Huzzah! And you can find us at patreon.com/musicals on screen.
Excellent.
Fabulous. Yay. Well, thank you so much, Al. This was so much fun.
Yes, it was.
I have learned things about you that I did not know before, like that you did not like filmed theater.
For shame.
That has made my day. I think that's so hilarious. Sorry. It's perfect. Oh, I love it.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to catching up next month.
Yay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Filmed Live Musicals is a labor of love, and we'd love to thank everyone who makes it possible. Thank you to star patrons Mercedes Esteban, Jesse Rabinowitz and Brenda Goodman, David and Catherine Rabinowitz, and Beck Twist for your support. If you'd like to support Filmed Live Musicals, please like and review the podcast, or find us on Twitter at Musicals On Screen and on Facebook at Filmed Live Musicals. If you'd like to support the site financially, you can find us at patreon.com/musicals on screen. $5 patrons receive early access to written content, and $10 patrons also receive early access to this very podcast. Visit www.filmedlivemusicals.com to learn more. Thanks for listening.